Idea of something that has become so popular since the return of normalcy, quote unquote, since the end of COVID. And one thing today that I think is going to be amazing to hit on with our very special guest, Sophia Graniela. We were talking about being empowered to travel, as your Instagram handle is, the Just Empowered Nomad, talking about what it is that people can do to have a fulfilling experience traveling in a realistic way that doesn't require flying business class around the world. So, Sophia, welcome. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm very excited to hear about the journey that you've embarked on with traveling in the last few years.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about travel. It's one of my biggest passions in life. So, yeah, thank you so much.
So, we're turning back the clock about 10-ish years ago now. I know that you had traveled to Ghana. That was one of the first times that you had an experience away from home, volunteering at an orphanage, and you said that it was a life-changing experience. And tell me a little bit about what it was that made you want to go there, how that experience changed your perspective on travel, and how things kind of continued to gradually roll towards that life after after going to Ghana.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was quite honestly one of the most memorable experiences to date. So it was back in 2013. I was kind of at a place in my life where I was just not sure what direction to take. I had society's expectations telling me to graduate college and go the, normal route. And I knew that I wanted to see the world, but I also knew that I wanted to make an impact and do something that was fulfilling and meaningful. So I started doing some research and was looking into volunteering at an orphanage somewhere in Africa. And I found an amazing program in Ghana that allowed me to go for a month and kind of get my feet wet because it was my first solo travel experience. And being there truly was not only a culture shock, but it was so incredible because it really opened your eyes to a part of the world that you may have just never even knew existed. And life there is so, so different than what we are used to here in the US or, other parts of the world. So being immersed in the culture there and just seeing how grateful the kids were and how people just lived there with very little, it made me so grateful and really shifted my perspective and made me wonder what else was out there in the world. And so that was kind of the turning point for me. Like being in Ghana, I was like, okay, now I want to see the rest of the world. I want to help people. I want to really empower people to take that leap, even if it feels super scary to be in a new culture and to go somewhere that's completely different from where you're from. Um, it is the most eye-opening, life-changing experience. So I would say starting out with a volunteer experience, I would never change it because it allowed me to meet people from all around the world, to teach kids from Ghana who truly just don't have the resources that we do here. And after that experience, it was just like everything changed. Like I just wanted to see as many places as possible. So yeah, it was truly life changing.
How did you decide on Ghana?
So I wanted a place at that time that was safe for me to travel solo. And at that time in Africa, that was a place that was recommended to me by other solo travelers. And I did a lot of research and just read that the people were really friendly. It was a good place to start as a volunteer. And so that's really how I chose Ghana. I was open to other areas, but something just drew me to that country.
So a lot of people you mentioned, especially in North America, and I know maybe in Western Europe, sometimes there's not as much exposure or knowledge of truly of other places of the world. Like, yeah, you can see a map and yeah, you can hear names, but it doesn't really register until you actually have an experience there or until you know somebody who's from there. So, what was it that even inspired you to want to go somewhere that far away in the first place? If you weren't as familiar with international surroundings at the time?
Absolutely. So I would say that from a young age, I did travel a bit with my family. So I was exposed to other cultures. For example, I'm Puerto Rican, I have family there. So I did go there every year for about 10 years when I was younger. So I always kind of had that little like travel bug that never goes away. I was like, okay, I know there's other cultures out there. I want to see the world. But I would say in 2013, I don't know, I had this really deep inner feeling that I had to go and do something on my own, and just push myself out of my comfort zone. So I think it was just something that deep down I knew I had to fulfill. Like there was just something within me that was like, I need to see a part of the world that intrigues me and I have like so many questions about, and I'm a little scared to go, but I know I have to do it. So it's just like this inner knowing.
Now, I know that most of the time, I'm sure when you tell people, yeah, I went to Africa by myself, the reaction is probably not something like, "Oh, wow, that's really cool," or "Holy, that must have been an amazing time. Tell me about it." A lot of people would probably be pretty shocked when you first told them about going there. Would What about the experience would you say was most demystifying prior to going?
I think it was just a lot of, I don't know, like the media in the US at least, it makes a lot of places seem so dangerous and so like out of reach for us. Like we shouldn't go there. We shouldn't do it because, I'm a female and it's dangerous and, you know, something bad's going to happen to you. And I think when I actually got there, it wasn't that way at all. Like, of course, no matter where you travel, even in the US, you have to be, just use your best judgment. But I think that getting there, you realize how truly nice the people were. They were so welcoming. I felt so safe. I truly felt like I was so welcomed in that country. And it wasn't like this crazy, scary experience that the US makes so many places out to be. So I think that's the biggest thing is like not always listening to the media and just like doing your research, talking to other people that have been there. Of course, like do your due diligence because at the end of the day, like you don't want to go into a new country without any prior knowledge. But I would say it's not as scary as people make it out to be.
So with like it's very easy to become scared, as you said, but I still feel that there might be would you say that there's still a certain level of maybe fear that you have when going to new countries or new places that you've never been, even despite all the research?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's good in a way to have a little bit of fear because I think that will still make you do the necessary steps to protect yourself, in any situation. You want to make sure you're, packing the right things. You want to make sure you're, not walking the streets alone at night, especially as a female. Like there's certain things you want to be careful about no matter where you are, even if you're in New York City or somewhere in the US. So I think it's okay to have a little bit of fear going into a new country, but I think it's important not to let that fear overtake your experience because so many beautiful things can happen when you step out of your comfort zone and you do things that are a little bit scary. But I think it's okay to still have a little bit of fear because even now with, a lot of solo travel experience, I still always will have a little bit of, this like feeling in my gut that's like, okay, so it might be a little scary. You're going to, be in a new place. You have to navigate new streets, meet new people. Like there is always that little bit of fear, but I think that's healthy.
So within the last year, you have been traveling and posting about the journeys that you've taken around the world to different places, working a job as a VA, and also having had a remote job. This is something that, as we mentioned just at the start here, has become more popular since remote work took off during COVID. And I do feel that the listener would most oftentimes feel like unless they are Fortune 500 company CEO, or they fly business class through Qatar Airways everywhere, that it's not possible to travel all the time. It's not possible to live this nomadic life. And you have to have these super fringe, extraneous circumstances in order to do it. But somehow you've managed to do it yourself without falling under all those categories at once. So, what was it that allowed you to make it actually happen and not just a pipe dream from scrolling endlessly on social media of all the travel influencers that exist out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So fun fact, I've actually never flown first class ever. It's on my bucket list, but haven't done it yet. Anyways, so my biggest like belief in life is like you can do anything you set your mind to, just with some belief in yourself and the right resources and tools. So about a year ago, I was working like a 9 to 5, but it was remote. So I was still able to, travel and see the world, which I was super grateful for. But I always knew that like the 9 to 5 life was not for me. Like I have worked so many different 9 to 5 jobs, and it was just like, okay, I know this is not like the track that I want to take in life. So about 4 years ago, I created a profile on Upwork and I started doing my VA as a side hustle. So I was essentially like on the weekends and nights, I was working extra hours, basically helping e-commerce brands with their customer service. So emails, chat, um, essentially just being, the the wing woman for different e-commerce brands. And I did that for about, like I said, 4 years. And I knew that I wanted to eventually take it full time, but I was, of course, scared because I was like, okay, if I leave the comfort of a 9 to 5, I won't have your typical, benefits. And there was just some like cushy things that I was scared to leave with my, corporate job. But about a year ago, I was just like, okay, I want to travel the world. I know I need to make the leap and leave the 9 to 5, because at the end of the day, even though my job was remote, I still had my meetings. I still had, things I would have to come home um, for the job. And so it still didn't really feel like freedom to me. Like it still was confined within that like corporate world, which is just, again, not what I wanted. So I finally made the leap. I was able to build up enough clients where I could fully leave my 9 to 5 and do my freelance virtual assistant full time. So that is what I'm doing now. And I really hope to help others do the same thing because, if you want something bad enough in life, I truly believe that you can make it happen. And traveling does not need to be this fancy, extravagant, expensive experience. I was recently in Vietnam and Bali for about 2 months, and I lived on much less than I live on in the US. And I was still able to stay in beautiful places, Airbnbs, homestays, hotels. And I just think that more people need to be exposed to these experiences because sometimes, travel influencers and travel bloggers, while they're all amazing, it sometimes can make traveling look so unobtainable and this like very expensive, unrealistic thing. And I remember like I used to scroll Instagram or TikTok and I would, see these beautiful hotels and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want to stay there. And then I would click it and it was, 500 US dollars a night. And it's just like, you know, unless, you want to splurge and do that for, a birthday trip or something like really, really special, that's just not feasible to do long term. And so I'm really trying to show people that traveling is, accessible, even if you aren't, living this extravagant life.
What would you say is the biggest thing that holds people back from feeling empowered to travel?
I would say definitely fear, fear of the unknown, fear of um, just like stepping out of their comfort zone. I think that a lot of times society has all these expectations on us from a young age, go to college, graduate, work that 9 to 5 job until, 65 when you retire. And I think just doing something out of the norm scares people. And taking that leap and following your heart and your, deepest desires and actually like just doing it. So I would say probably fear is the number one thing. And then second would be the expenses. Like I think people just have this idea that traveling is really, really expensive and it's not something they can do. So I feel like it holds them back as well.
There's a quote I heard recently about this idea of fear you talk about, where oftentimes it's not that we fear failure, it's more so that we fear the judgment that comes with failure and the judgment that comes with doing certain things. So it's almost as if we care more about what people are going to say about our actions than the actual result of our actions.
I completely agree. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things. I always used to be like so nervous about posting on Instagram and, showing my face and doing all these things just because of what other people are going to think. And I think something that I've learned recently is other people are not living your life. Like, you have this life and you get to decide how you're going to live it. You get to decide if you're going to travel, if you're going to step out of your comfort zone, if you're going to have a life that's fulfilling, that you truly love. And other people aren't living your life. So why let that judgment dictate how you're going to live? It's your life. So, yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that holds people back.
What was your family and friends' reaction to you deciding, like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna pack my shit up and bounce across the world. See you later.
So I'm very lucky in the sense that I have a very supportive family when it comes to traveling. Like my family has always known since I was young that this is what I want to do. Like I love traveling so much. It's what lights me up. My friends, same thing. Like they always just knew like I'm a pretty like free spirit. I'm not ever really following like society's norm. So no one was really surprised when I told them. And I would say they were very supportive, but I definitely would say that, some friends don't always understand because they haven't done it or it's maybe not something that they're as interested in doing. But overall, I would say they were just like, wow, okay, like go for it. We support you. Just because, like I said, for so many years, like this is always how I've been. Like I'll just pack up and go somewhere just because I want to. So they weren't very surprised.
Now, let's say if the listener is somebody who doesn't have a lot of people in their life, maybe that are aligned with this new version of themselves or their values, what advice or insight would you offer to people who don't have as many maybe supportive friends or family or people that are on board with the way that they want to live their life, barring that it's completely different from maybe what people's idea of them was for many years, and now that that's changed?
Yeah, so that's definitely tricky. Not having, let's say supportive family or supportive friends. I would say the biggest thing is showing them. So, like, if it were me and I didn't have, let's say, a supportive family or supportive friends, I would just let them know to put their trust into me. I'm going to, show you that traveling or living this lifestyle isn't what you might think it is. And I would, to be honest, do my best to kind of tune out the voices because at the end of the day, you can either let their judgment or their opinions dictate the route you take in life, or you can let them know, like, hey, I'm going to show you that this is not what you might think it is. And I would continue to prove them wrong and I would travel and I would do the things just because at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, like it's your life, it's not theirs. Um, and just like, do things that can show them that it's not as scary as it could be. So like, let's say you have parents that are like, oh my gosh, solo traveling is so dangerous. Like you shouldn't do it. If you're going to go and solo travel, like make sure you're in communication with them, like prove to them that the life isn't as scary as they might think it is. And, you know, posting like different things in a country, like how nice the people are or the experiences you're having, and essentially like show the people in your life that the lifestyle isn't what they might think it is. So essentially, like, you know, respect their opinions and their feedback, but don't let that stop you from seeing the world. Because I truly think like if you let their voices get in your head too much, like it can shift how you view the world and how you make decisions in your life. And I think at the end of the day, like respect them, but also keep on doing what makes you happy.
Absolutely. I mean, it is your life at the end of the day after all, and I think sometimes people don't really stop to think about that, or they're too concerned with what people are going to say or trying to people please. I think that's probably a big problem that people who don't travel or who don't do the things they truly feels authentic to themselves struggle with a lot. And I think also maybe worrying too much about the negatives or the downsides of the decisions they're about to make rather than thinking about the what if best case scenario, what if this amazing thing, what if I feel so happy, or what if I feel so fulfilled, or I meet these people, or whatever it is. I think thinking about the downsides versus the upsides is another just weird mindset, because there's just as high of a likelihood of those things happening as the good things, and vice versa. So when you think about the good things more so, then you're going to attract more of those experiences than being focused on, oh, these bad things could happen, or I could be in danger, or it could cost a lot of money, or whatever, insert whatever fear you have.
Absolutely. Mindset is honestly like one of like the most, if not the most important thing in life. I think if you have a positive mindset, like you said, you're going to attract positivity in your life. And I think if you go into a situation with a positive mindset, you're going to come out of it with a much better experience. And if you go into an experience with a negative mindset, thinking something bad is going to happen. And that just goes for so many things in life. I think like if you just believe in yourself and you believe like, yes, I can quit my 9 to 5, I can travel the world, like you will be able to do it. It's mindset is everything, truly.
So with this lifestyle, there are always costs to everything. It's not as sunshine and rainbows, of course, as people think it is. And particularly in the department of relationships in life, whether it's seeing family and friends or having a romantic relationship, etc. Those are some of the things that maybe become not limited, but require a different avenue from what people who live in the same place all the time experience. So, how would you say that you have managed the family, friends, and romantic relationship departments of your life based on the way in which you live nomadically?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the tricky aspects of being a digital nomad are the friendships and relationships. I would say friendships, I have like my incredible friendships that I've had for a while here in the US. And as I mentioned before, they're very supportive and they know that I travel a lot. So when I am traveling, I think it's super important to stay connected, whether that's, a FaceTime call or catching up, on a weekly basis or however much time you have. Really fostering those relationships for me is one of the most important things when I'm traveling because it still gives me like that sense of connection. Um, and then when I'm actually traveling, you know, meeting people on the road is amazing. Like I've met some of my best friends traveling and there's some of like the most unique relationships because you're meeting, in another country and you're connecting on things that you might not connect on if you're meeting them in your hometown or home country. But they're also difficult because, you might meet someone and have like a month with them, and then all of a sudden you're in a different place in the world and they're not there anymore. So I would say friendships on the road in, the digital nomad aspect can be difficult because you don't know how long you have with them. But I also think that's something that's beautiful about it because then you're making friendships in all different places around the world. Um, and so I would say for friendships, it's just important to really make the additional effort to keep in touch. So, schedule that FaceTime call, try to do something. Like I have friends where I'll like do a FaceTime and we'll like cook dinner together and like just have like these heart to hearts and catch ups. And so I would say, like, when you are traveling, be open-minded. Don't close yourself off to making friendships, even if it's going to hurt when you guys part ways, because you will find time someday in the future to meet up again. Like, I've had many friendships where we've met up somewhere else in the world, and it's just like even more beautiful to try to, catch up and talk about your travels. So yeah, I would say friendships are definitely one of the trickier parts when you're traveling, but just make time and be open-minded because you never know who you're going to meet. Um, and then in terms of like dating, to be honest, I haven't been dating. It's another one of those things where if you are traveling full time, um, meeting someone who's kind of on that same path. But again, I would say like just be open-minded. Like I'm not closed off to dating, but it just hasn't been something that I've focused on or put a lot of time on. But I would say like the best things happen when you're not looking for them. So I would say again, be open-minded. Like if you're traveling, you meet someone, you want to explore the connection, do it. Um, I also think it's important not to make something like that like your focus when you travel, because I feel like you miss out on so many other things. I think just be open-minded and enjoy everything that the trip or your travels throws your way. And then if you feel like you want to date, go for it. But my biggest piece of advice for anyone is do not have expectations. And that goes for friendships and relationships and dating on the road. Like, don't have any expectations, be open-minded, be friendly, and see where it takes you. Because like I said, like the best things happen in life when you're not searching for them.
I couldn't agree more. That's definitely the almost the irony of that paradox when you are looking and you're like, I really want this, I really want this, and it's just like the law of I can't remember what it's called in Stoicism or something where it's like, oh, you like it's like the law of like detachment or something where you when you really, really want something super, super bad, you never get it.
Yep,
When you stop caring, you're like, I don't give a fuck.
exactly.
I don't want to do it. And then guess what? Then that's when it happens.
Yep, every time. So I've just learned like anytime that I'd like want something so badly, it doesn't happen. So it's like, you know what? Just let things go and let things fall into place the way that they're supposed to. I'm a firm believer like you attract like the energy that you put out, but also don't hold on to things so tightly. Just be open to exploring, be open-minded, smile at strangers, and just see what happens.
Now, this is something that people who I've talked to are digital nomads, and even like for someone like myself, I know they've been peppered with these questions, and people say to you like, "Well, when's this gonna run out?" Or "When are you gonna start a family?" Or "When are you gonna insert XYZ thing?" How do you approach the way that like the future vision of your life, knowing that yes, our time on earth is finite, but it's still very flexible based on the vision that you see. So how do you approach your future visions based on living this life that's not very normal, number one, and number two, isn't within a conventional stable box of the same routine in the same place every day?
Yeah, I would say it's super important to not be so I don't know, not put so much pressure on yourself in terms of like future. Like, what am I going to do? Am I going to have kids? Am I going to get married? Like, I think it's okay to not know necessarily. Like, for me, the way that I look at it is yes, we have this life on earth. We, obviously want to have goals for ourselves, but I think it's important to not be so confined. Like, okay, I have to know, I'm going to get married at this age. I'm going to have kids by this age. Because I feel like you miss out on so much in life when you're always trying to stay on this timeline. Like, I think living this lifestyle as a digital nomad, it's definitely like people are always like, well, what about settling down? Like, are you going to meet someone? Are you going to, do this and do that? And while sometimes those questions pop into my mind, I also know that whatever is for me is going to come into my life when the time is right. And so I think it's important to set goals for yourself if you are living this lifestyle, but also be present. I think too many people live in the future or the past where we are so focused on what's next or the future that we miss out on what's right in front of us. And so I think it's really important to just live in the current and soak up all the moments and have, set realistic goals, obviously, because I think it's super important to have goals, but not let them take over.
That's, I don't know if I could have put in a better words myself. This idea of like putting pressure on yourself is, I don't know if it's just a generational thing or what it is, but why do you feel like our generation puts so much pressure on ourselves to do things by a certain timeline?
There's a couple things. I think first is like the previous generation. So like our parents, for example, they lived in a completely different generation where, they got married young, they had kids. Um, they didn't, go and solo travel and live this digital nomad lifestyle. Like they focused on, building that life, that white picket fence. And I think that got passed down from their generation to us. So I think, like I said earlier, like I have a very supportive family, but I do think that a lot of times people's family and who they're around really do dictate the path that they take in life. I think like a lot of people, might have families or it's within their culture, where they're like, they need to go and be a doctor or a lawyer or follow this traditional path. And that's not wrong for everyone. Like if that's the path that you desire, by all means, like follow your heart and do what makes you happy. But I think a lot of it comes from previous generations and what they think is right because based on like their experience. And then I would also just say like society's expectations. So like just seeing people work this, rat race, this 9 to 5, they work until 65. We're always like pushed to, have retirement and all of these, things to set us up for success in the future, which again, like, yes, finances are very important and you should have things set up for the future. But I don't think that you have to do it in the traditional way. And so I would say, yeah, like just previous generations, I think people just think, okay, this is the path that you should go down because this is what society believes is right, and for some people, maybe it is. But I would say that our generation now is, I think, starting to really just change things up. Like people are entrepreneurs and starting their own businesses and just doing things that actually light them up versus what society has said is the right thing to do. So yeah, I think that's why.
Now, when embarking on a journey like this, oftentimes one that can be great is going to be spent alone, as we've talked about. There can be some supportive friends and family, but they're most likely not following you on the road everywhere. And you may not be spending as much time at home with your parents or with loved ones as most people who live in the same place all the time. What are some of the things that you consume that inspire you to stay aligned with the path and to keep going, whether it's inspirational quotes or media or movies, whatever it is? What are some of the things that you do that help you to stay in alignment with this life you're living?
Absolutely. For me, a huge part of my life right now is reading like self-help books. That's been a huge help for me. Financial literacy books, like anything that can help inspire me and push me towards bettering myself on a daily basis. Podcasts have also been huge. So lots of mindset podcasts and just things that, help, even if I'm feeling, lonely on the road or I'm feeling like I need like a little push. We all have our days where we might start to get into our heads or question if we're making the right decisions. So throwing on a podcast or picking up a book always helps me. Like those are my two biggest things. And I recommend anyone to really surround themselves, even if they're alone, like surround themselves with positive people. So even if like that, like I said, that's on a podcast, that can truly shift your mindset in so many ways.
What are some of your favorite books in the self-help category that you've read recently?
Yeah. So a couple of my favorites, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That one has been that was amazing because to be honest, like I a lot of us I think have grown up thinking all of these things about finances and it just completely shattered so many of my beliefs. So Rich Dad Poor Dad, 4 Hour Work Week, I believe it's by Tim Ferriss. That's a
Yeah.
great one. What are the other ones? There's a few more that I've read recently. The Atomic Habits, that was amazing. Like so good. I would say those are three that I've loved recently. And then I'm currently reading another one and I'm blanking on the name right now. But again, it's like it's a great book just for motivation and creating a life that's just not traditional.
All those three books you said are absolute bangers. I remember the first time I read all of
Yeah.
them. And Rich Dad Poor Dad was actually the first book that I read that broke my brain when it came to thinking about this lifestyle, the financial mindset, everything. Just I remember my brother had been clamoring for me to read it for so long. He's like, "You got to read it. You got to read it. You got to read it." I was like, "What the hell's a Rich Dad Poor Dad?" Like, what? And then the second I picked it up, like 2 days later, done. Just plowed through the whole thing
Yep.
nonstop. And if if the person listening to this has not read the book already, whatever you do, go to the library. If you don't want to buy it, take it out, crush it in 2 or 3 days. Super easy read. And once you read and take in the lessons from that book, you will never be the same. You will never be able to
Yeah.
unsee and unknow the information passed on to you, even if it is a fictitious story or whatever. The lesson stands true and stands, and it passes the test of time. And the
Yeah.
fact that you don't have to trade your time for money and thinking in different ways creates different results and so many other lessons. Even Atomic Habits, that's another banger. Just very, very simple. And 4 Hour Work Week, that one literally made me quit my job, like straight up.
Yeah.
Like I'd just the section in there where he talks about the CEO midlife crisis, where you look at your boss's life if you're just starting your career, and that's what the average life that you're going to live is going to look like. Would you keep going? And usually the answer comes pretty clear. If you're reading that book, you're reading it for a certain reason. And once you get to that part, you're going to know the answer right away, 9 times out of 10.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one more that I always like to mention because I love Jay Shetty is Think Like a Monk. That one is more so just obviously like mindset and another amazing read.
Yes, I feel like there's even in that book, like there's so much to be learned that is very simple and oftentimes like I feel like you hear these things said and you're like, that seems obvious. But if it was really that obvious, then wouldn't you have already known that, or wouldn't you already be putting it into practice?
Exactly.
It does bear repeating because I don't think, as this the stats and studies would say, you don't learn something the first time you hear it. It's like you got to read something 10 times in order for you to actually get it. But then when you teach something to somebody, then you retain 90% of the information. So hence, in teaching others how to feel empowered with traveling or how to find ways and hacks that don't need to make it a super expensive venture, I'm sure that it's going to stick with you a lot easier.
I agree. Absolutely.
What would you say have been some of the best hacks that have helped you to make travel more realistic and affordable in your life?
So first I would say is like booking travel. So I would say I always use Skyscanner to book my flight. Um, so that's been like the biggest people are, for and against it, but I personally have always found amazing deals there. Also there's an app called Hopper. So what that does is it can actually predict the flights and the prices going up and down. And it's been pretty accurate for me. So Skyscanner and Hopper for my flights. And then in terms of like actually being able to afford travel, I would say I always try to like put away a certain amount of money into a special account that will only be used for travel. So it makes things feel a bit easier when you're actually going and planning. Um, and it allows me to do like all of the adventurous things that I want to do. I love anything like adrenaline. I love scuba diving, all the things. So those activities aren't always the cheapest. So I think having like a side fund for travel is really helpful when it comes to booking all of those. And then I would say like another thing for me is that I always recommend like when people are looking into like where they want to travel to is first things first is like you want to look at like okay, like what is this trip going to look like? Like is it going to be like a budget trip? Is it going to be mid-range? Do I have more money to splurge? Because then that dictates where I'm going to travel to. So for example, like if you're like, okay, I want to live this digital nomad lifestyle, I want to live there for a year, you're probably not going to pick a place that's going to be expensive to travel around. So, I would recommend you look into Asia, for example. Like when I was in Vietnam, I was able to travel there for, I don't know, 1500 US a month. And that included everything like activities. And I was not staying in budget hostels. I was staying in my own private Airbnbs and homestays. So I would say think about your budget, what you want your trip to look like, and then pick a place that's going to be in line with what you're looking to spend essentially. And then from there, you can go somewhere and actually enjoy your travels. Like, I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't have to be like budgeting every single thing because at the end of the day, like, that's not fun. Like, you should have a budget obviously in mind. And I do follow certain things, but I think if you choose the place that's going to be in line with what you're able to spend, you're going to have such a better experience. And then when I'm actually in those places, there's websites like Guru Walk, and other experiences where you can find tours completely for free. You can meet people that way. You can do like, these walking tours where you decide how much you want to donate. And then from there, it's a lot easier to decide like what you're able to spend once you're actually in a place and you can see what you're spending on, your homestays and your food and everything like that. But yeah, I would say Hopper and Skyscanner for flight, and then really decide what you want your trip to look like, and then decide where you want to go, and then kind of design it from there.
If you were to give advice to somebody who's in their early 20s wanting to start living a digital nomad life, what would be the biggest piece of advice you would give them, from whether it be a lesson that you've learned along the way or a mindset shift that is crucial to be able to get them to help them get themselves to where they want to go?
Yeah. So I would say my biggest piece of advice in your 20s is okay, just do it, is my biggest piece of advice. But also, it's a it's okay to start somewhere and not have any idea what the outcome is going to be, but just get your feet wet. So what I mean by that is if you're scared to solo travel, go take a weekend trip in your home country, that's a couple hours away. Like start to get yourself comfortable with being on your own in surroundings that you might not be used to. That's what my biggest piece of advice would be, is to just start somewhere. Because I think, you know, putting on a backpack and flying across the world, while that's something that I would do because, well, I've done it, obviously, and because that's always just kind of like been in my blood, not everyone is comfortable doing that. So I would say get used to doing little trips solo, and then eventually like you can ease your way into other countries or places that you initially might be scared to go to by yourself. um but yeah, my biggest piece of advice is just do it. Don't let other people's opinions of this lifestyle change your mind, because as I said so many times in this talk, is like you have this one life to live. Make it something that you're proud of, make it something that you're excited about, and baby steps are steps. Like even like with building habits, like building micro habits every single day is going to get you to where you want to be. So it's okay to start small.
Amen. No better way it could have been said. Sophia, I greatly appreciate the time that you spent chatting with me today. about empowering others to travel, your digital nomad lifestyle, and the mindset shifts required in order to live a life that you find is fulfilling, not on the terms and opinions of other people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was truly so much fun. I love talking about it, and thank you.